Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters. Today we're talking about Jupiter stations direct in Gemini, and my astrology star sister joining me today is Madam Simon. Hi, Simon. It's good to see you. How are you today?
Pretty good. It's been awfully chilly here in Seattle, and that tends to make me want to hibernate.
Well, I mean,
But
might even get some snow in a few days.
oh
I don't
my
know.
goodness.
And
It's
I'm your
funny though, like snow I actually kind of like because if you've got snow on the roof, then the house is warm. So
and I'm your host, Elizabeth Liz Muschett. Um, to get a hold of Simon, her website is iconalchemy.com, and to get a hold of me, my website is alightpath.com, and we both enjoy hearing from you. And here's a picture of Jupiter, which we're going to be talking about tonight. Jupiter stations. Jupiter stationed retrograde October 9th of 2024 at 21 degrees of Gemini in 20 minutes. Jupiter stations direct on February 4th of 2025 at 11 degrees Gemini in 16 minutes. So would you like to tell us a few things about Jupiter, Simon, please?
okay. So Jupiter classically rules Sagittarius and Pisces. Modern astrologers consider Jupiter to be ruler of Sagittarius only, and has an affinity with the ninth and 12th houses if we are considering those two have an affinity for certain signs. I don't quite go with the 12 sign alphabet, as it is sometimes referred to. I like to think that the houses are independent in their meaning of the signs, but there are a fair number of modern astrologers who view them as being linked. So then, especially for modern astrologers, there might be an association with the ninth house for Jupiter. Um, Jupiter relates to the search for truth and meaning, the desire for growth and expansion. Um, I like to say that everything that Jupiter touches, Jupiter makes bigger. Um, Jupiter relates to the spirit of adventure, long distance travel, visiting foreign lands, and anything that is related to that which is foreign. You will see in connections with Jupiter. Um, Religion, philosophy, faith. And I like to say, with regard to Jupiter, that this is not simply religious faith, though obviously religion is associated with Jupiter, but more importantly, really, it is the faith that you're up to the tasks ahead of you, that the sun's going to rise tomorrow, and that everything's going to work out all right. Okay. So Jupiter gives us that sense of hope and optimism, a trust in the universe we can associate with Jupiter. Jupiter is associated with truth, abundance, good luck, and of course, luck is often dependent on us exposing ourselves to more opportunities. So that fits in with Jupiter's expansionist quality. Jupiter is associated with higher education and with self-confidence. But if Jupiter's being at all problematic, then we can get, braggadocio. We can get people being a bit too big for their britches, or overly optimistic, overly indulgent. Overspending we can see with Jupiter, especially when we have interactions between Jupiter and Venus, or Jupiter and Pluto.
And then Jupiter is the biggest and oldest planet. It's formed from the dust and gases of the sun. Jupiter has 95 moons, spins fast on its axis, and a day on Jupiter is 12 and a half hours of Earth time. Would you like to do this one?
Okay, so Gemini is a mutable sign. It's flexible, brings projects to completion. It's got that tweaking and inventive kind of quality. It's adaptable because of that mutability. And so that's great finishing energy. It's that getting everything fine-tuned and ready for presentation. Gemini's ruling planet is Mercury. It's an air sign, and it's associated with communication, with siblings, with community. It's sociable, intellectual. In medical astrology, rules the hands, hands and arms, actually. The mantra that would be associated with Gemini is I think. Its keywords are networking, student, multitasker, options, duality, versatile, sociable. It's associated with mood swings. And really, there's that kind of changeable quality to Gemini where Geminis can be known for changing their minds rather suddenly. So that somebody can think that a Gemini believes one thing, and then a short while later they're contradicted in this and can be kind of confused by that. But really, what's going on is the Gemini got new information, okay, and therefore changed the opinion to match the new information to accommodate that constantly learning quality. The cautions that one would associate with Gemini are overwhelm or boredom, jumping from one thing to another, black and white thinking. This kind of, there's a binary quality with Gemini. It's a sign of the twins, right? And so, there's kind of this, it's a sorting intelligence. It's not going too deeply into any one topic. Instead, it goes on in a more broad fashion, which actually, interestingly enough, goes reasonably well with Gemini, despite Gemini being the sign of Jupiter's detriment.
Well, and since it's the sign of the twins, I've heard people say it's like they have two personalities or two ways of being, a dualness to them.
Right. But I mean, one can relate a sizable amount of human experience to binary code, on, off, 0, 1. Okay.
Well,
And so that makes a lot of sense then, on that kind of surface level. Yeah, we're just going to look at things in this dualistic fashion when we're just starting to do that early learning. That's kind of what kids can do. What is that phrase from that what was a television show in the early 90s? Mama, not the mama. Okay. So, that fits very well with Gemini's thinking. We're just trying to see what is this thing and what is not this thing. And then we can get into the finer details later.
Absolutely. So Jupiter stations retrograde on October 9th at 21 degrees Gemini, and this is the chart for Seattle. And if you want any more information on this, you can go back and watch the show that Simon and I did probably in early October for the Jupiter stations retrograde, but we're going to review it just briefly here. There was quite a few aspects. There was a water grand trine. two overlapping yods, a T-square. So there was a lot going on. So would you like to briefly sum this up for us?
So we see Mars as a big player here, participating both in the grand water trine and in the T-square with Juno and Chiron. And Chiron is also in a Mars-ruled sign. And then within that grand water trine, we also see that Mars is with, is connected to Venus, and Venus is in a Mars-ruled sign. And then Juno in the T-square is in a Venus-ruled sign. So we've got those kinds of interconnections going on. And then also within the context of the yod, that we've got Venus sextile Vesta, and they are pointing to Chiron. So there's that emphasis on Chiron as well. And of course, the grand water trine has Mars connecting with Saturn as well as Venus. So, that's two personal planets with a social planet. And it's, Venus is this planet of the connective principle, what it is that we want. And then Mars is the how do we go about getting what we want, right? And so when these two are in a grand water trine together with Saturn, then there is that stabilization that Saturn offers, which might be helpful to that Venus who is in her detriment in Scorpio. She doesn't really like to be in Scorpio because it's kind of intense there. Venus just wants to waft out the pheromones and draw the good things to her. She does not want to have to, to work and be obsessed about stuff and, have that driven kind of quality that we can see with Scorpio. She wants to relax, and she doesn't get a lot of relaxation in Scorpio, particularly on an emotional level. Whereas that Saturn in Pisces there is offering her some emotional maturity and stability. And then, of course, Mars is also in the sign of Mars's fall, right? In Cancer, and that's opposite of the sign of Mars's exaltation, which is ruled by Saturn. So even though both Mars and Venus are not in places that they like to be, Saturn is in a place that Venus likes to be and rules the sign of Capricorn where Mars likes to be. So that Saturn is doing a lot of work there to try to stabilize and make these two feel better about what it is that we want and how do we get it. Okay. And to work more with our feelings in order to get what we want. But that Mars there in the context of this grand trine with that that T-square, is ruling over both the Venus and the grand water trine and that Chiron. And so we're getting a lot of this flavor of Mars in this space of trying to navigate feelings that Mars doesn't want to have to get into the feelings. Mars wants to just get stuff done, right? Get what we want. But, in Cancer, we actually have to consider not only our own feelings, but the feelings of those closest to us. And so I feel like that's, it's interesting, Mars in this T-square with Chiron and with Juno in a Venus-ruled sign is sort of getting a kind of a double whammy of this you have to pay attention to feelings, and you have to pay attention to what's going on with others, and and how do you feel about it, and how do they feel about it, and and at the same time, maybe there's some hurts and some sensitivities that have to be addressed. And Mars is like, I don't want to have to pussyfoot around all this stuff. you know? So so that was a bit uncomfortable for Mars. And recognize also, we see this is Mars in Cancer, which Mars has been retrograding back to now ever since. So in fact, Mars is getting pretty close to this this point that we see Mars at. This 19 degrees. I think Mars is currently at what, 20 degrees?
Approximately,
Maybe.
yes.
Yeah. So so there's this resonance that we're seeing here, not just with, okay, now Jupiter is kind of stationed direct, but here's this space where Jupiter was stationed retrograde and Mars is touching a similar point. So that's an interesting correspondence we see there. Those overlapping yods, there's definitely some pressure on the social front that is added by the yod from Chiron sextile Jupiter pointing to Venus. That Chiron Jupiter sextile may have offered us a bit of kindness around our hurts, but also could, because it's Jupiter and he expands what he touches, it could also make some hurts bigger. So it was a interesting dynamic with a lot of feelings around it, and emotional social pressures going on.
Well, and I could say that since the relationship planets and the relationship asteroid is all involved, that there could have been a lot of growth and healing with, touching Chiron in there, expanding how we even view relationships, like we could be have been reviewing our relationships, and now we're going to partner and be in relationships in a new way because we've grown ourselves personally too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of potential for growth here, but not necessarily comfortable growth.
No, I would say it was hard work,
Yeah.
and sometimes not so fun to even face it in some respects. But, the rewards could be really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And long
So,
term, given Saturn's involvement.
yes, because putting in that hard work can, really help you grow. So Jupiter stations direct on February 4th, and this chart is for Seattle, and it happens at 1:41 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and at 4:41 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, starting out with some aspects to Jupiter, we have Jupiter quincunx Vesta, which is 150 degrees, and Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pallas Athena, which is 135 degrees or a square and a half. So, would you like to tell us about these? And it's really interesting that these two aspects are to asteroids.
Right. So, Vesta in Scorpio. Again, this is a Mars ruled thing, so there's a little bit of martial flavor there. But it's this, of course, Mars is in the sign of his fall. And so there's still that kind of detrimental feeling about it, that like, this is a little dicey territory. Vesta in Scorpio. Vesta very much relates to what is our focus. What do we hold dear? What do we hold sacred? What is maybe safe space isn't quite the right word, but this area that is of paramount importance to us. Relating that to the hearth. I mean, where do people gather in a house? They gather around the kitchen, right? so so Vesta can relate to that, but also, they gather around the heat. They gather around, where is their best protection from the elements? Okay, where is their heat and where is their light, and the potential to tend to our survival needs. Okay, so Vesta in Scorpio then is holding deep emotions and the possibility of deep transformation as being sacred, as being where our focus is. But when Jupiter is quincunx Vesta, when two planets or two bodies are quincunx each other, they have difficulty understanding each other. They don't share an element. They don't share a modality. And so, they have a relationship because of the quincunx, but they have difficulty balancing their perspectives. It's kind of like they're on a seesaw, trying to each get their needs met and be heard and understood. And so when we've got Jupiter at a quincunx to that Vesta, Jupiter in Gemini has expanded the information that we're encountering and that we're trying to process. And again, Gemini has that sorting quality. So we've had a lot to sort through in terms of information, and to, as quickly as we can, because it's just coming at us, okay, to try to sort it into, okay, good, bad, or I can tend to this, I can't tend to this. This has to go by the wayside for a little while. And when our focus and our values, what it is that we hold sacred is depth. Of course, that's not going to understand this quick sorting of data. And so I feel like this combination is part of what is, having people struggling with what judgments to make about what they're presented with at this time, and struggling with, how do they feel about the information that they're dealing with, and what kinds of feelings is it bringing up? What kinds of things are we having to try to process, maybe later, or whenever it is that we can somehow muster the time and attention, but there's just so much coming at us. So I think that this combination is a reminder to us to be kinder to ourselves about this, because this is quite a tap dance we're having to do here. Okay. And then Jupiter says we quadrate Pallas. I find that interesting in combination with the Jupiter quincunx Vesta, because Pallas is our planning, strategic thinking, our wisdom. Pallas was both goddess of wisdom and a goddess of war, right? And capable of being very dispassionate. In Capricorn, there's definitely that, taking the long view and not allowing emotions to get us all worked up to to the detriment of our planning selves. And that can be good with the Jupiter and Gemini, but Capricorn doesn't like to kind of scramble around in that scattered squirrel way that we can see, that we have seen with Jupiter in Gemini. And Capricorn wants things to be solid and dependable. And that is not what we've seen with this Jupiter in Gemini. And so there is some friction that's going on in terms of how do we plan appropriately for the long haul when we are processing this excessive amount of data and having to think quickly on our feet in response to sudden changes. That's quite a combination. So
Yes. Well, and
let's not
Jupiter
be
and
surprised if we're having trouble. That's all.
yeah, Jupiter and Gemini having all that information coming, and it's just getting bigger and more. And Pallas Athena is like, wait, I have a plan. Don't change my plan. I don't want to change my plan.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But with
Or
that,
scrap the plan altogether, which sometimes has to happen when you're dealing with with sudden changes, and that does not make Capricorn happy.
so these aspects are giving us a little bit of tension here and asking us to change, which 2025 is, I'm calling it the year of change. So it's like we're going to have to kind of go with that flow a little bit, even though these aspects, have a little bit of tension and they're not so sure that they want to, but I think that they'll do it. So then we have a Jupiter trine Mercury and Sun. Go ahead.
So that's a plus because Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. And here we see both Mercury and the Sun are in they're in Aquarius. They're co-present with Pluto, so there's a little extra depth and soulfulness there. But that sign is classically ruled by Saturn, and so that brings a little bit more solid, dependable, stable energy. Even if Aquarius can sometimes be a bit of a live wire, and there's definitely, modern astrologers do view this sign as being ruled by Uranus, who has just stationed direct as well. And so there may be some kind of Twitterpation going on there. But it's very nice to have this trine during this station direct because Mercury being the ruler of Gemini and being in a more stable place, a place that Mercury does like to be, that gives us some sense of structure and support for our thinking, but also makes our thoughts subject to peer review so that we're not just coming up with kooky ideas in isolation. It's a very nice combination, and the Sun's presence there, even though the Sun is now separating from the trine with Jupiter, there still is that light of discernment that's going on. Now the Sun is in the sign of its detriment in Aquarius, and anytime you have two planets that are in detriment, in contact with each other, there can be a bit of blind leading the blind going on. But I would say that this Sun Jupiter combination, even though they're in slightly difficult spots, is very nice for at least helping us to kind of, especially if we've been feeling a bit battered by the news cycle, that at least this gives us a little bit more of a sense of, okay, wait, there are still good possibilities in life. There are still things to be hopeful about, and to have some confidence in our own capabilities. And I do like this in combination with Mercury, because since Mars is still retrograde, this is good for us doing some planning, as opposed to going all gung-ho forward with Mars stuff when we can't. Right? That Mars still being retrograde in a water sign is still asking us to do the internal work. Okay. But here we can do some internal work, processing the information we've been getting, and now determining how are we actually going to use that when we can move forward with our actions when Mars does turn direct.
That's good. And, maybe getting some of the information or our research is coming together and um, gaining a piece that we were missing to just kind of make the whole picture.
Yep. Yeah, I do very much feel like this has been a bit of there's been missing pieces of the puzzle, and this can help us get some of those pieces of information that we really need to make things work.
Or the person that you need to help or have on your team, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, did I miss a slide? Nope, I didn't. Okay, just wanted to make sure. So some other aspects are an Earth and water grand trine. Pluto is sextile Venus. South node, Black Moon Lilith are sextile Juno. Sextile Pallas and Pluto. Sextile North node, Neptune and Venus. And Sun is sextile Chiron. So I just said a whole bunch, but maybe we can peel them down and separate them a little bit. Go ahead.
So let's see. I believe, is that the oscillating or the mean position of Lilith?
I
I
think it's
suspect it's
mean.
probably. Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah, maybe. I wasn't thinking that Lilith was all the way back into Virgo, but I followed the interpolated position, so and I know that's been in Libra. So might be the oscillating, because that tends to swing pretty wildly. But we see that with the South Node there, trine Uranus, and trine Pallas, with Pallas still getting some Plutonian flavor there. So again, that's our dearly cherished plans, maybe kind of up in the air, in connection with that. But with Uranus having recently stationed direct, I do feel like that it's still, there can be some potentially positive results from that. One of the things that I think can be important, that we're going to be reminded of with this South Node transiting Virgo, is that it's real easy to get kind of precious about, oh, I really have to have this happen this way. And a lot of times we can have ourselves, that gets in the way of us actually getting to where we want to go. That we got so tied to doing something in one particular way, or having success look like one particular thing. When in actuality, we could have things be much better than we ever anticipated if we're willing to let go of our preconceived notions about things. That's very much what I feel is going on with that particular grand trine that we're seeing. With the water grand trine, so we've still got, this is the ascendant in Seattle, so I feel like this is much more localized to Seattle and the west coast of the United States. But it's Mars retrograde with Saturn conjoining the ascendant. And I feel like maybe that is encouraging us to do more internal work that's going to affect how we actually show up in the world. Okay. So that it's not that we're working on the external stuff, we're working on the internal stuff, but it's going to have reverberations out in the world. And then with those sextiles that we're seeing, there's the sextile from the South Node to
Juno
in Scorpio. And again, that's, South Node energy is is releasing, but it can also be, a reminder of where have we come from, and asking us to assess, what are we still holding on to, especially when it comes to our sense of our obligations, our agreements. What is it that glues our relationships and our partnerships together? And is that still healthy? Is that still stuff we want to be holding on to? Or not? And then, that's actually forming a minor grand trine with that palace there. And so again, that feeds into what I was talking about previously about, we may have to loosen up our hold on some of our plans. And then here we've got Pluto sextile Venus. And we will be talking about Venus a little bit more shortly, I believe. But Venus at this point will have just moved into Aries less than 2 hours prior to this station direct. And so Venus is applying to a sextile with Pluto. Anytime you get Venus and Pluto in supportive aspects together, there can be this kind of intensity to our relationships. And I feel like that is giving a certain amount of reinforcement to the Juno in Scorpio being at the head of that minor grand trine that is also really forming a kite with Uranus at the tail and Juno at the head. And so, Uranus at the tail is like trying to steer stuff with, there's these changes that need to happen. And Juno at the head is like, yes, but we still must, uphold certain standards for our social connections and our social contract and our relationships and our, the institutions that we uphold. But in combination with that palace and the South Node, there's like, well, you might have to loosen your death grip on some things.
And then Pallas is sextile to Neptune and the North Node too.
Oh, yeah, good point. So now that's interesting because Neptune and the North Node. Let me think. 3 days prior to the Jupiter station, we will have had Venus and Neptune and the North Node and the Moon in Pisces all conjoining each other. That would be on the 1st of February. That is a once in a lifetime transit. We're not ever going to see that happen again. But now in the context of this Jupiter station happening a few days later, we've got Venus heading from the sign of her exaltation into one of the signs of her detriment, Aries, Mars ruled. Okay. So she's going from this kind of like heightened state of grace combined with Neptunian glamour and spirituality and inspiration into now, oh my goodness, I have to work for it again. Just what I said previously about her in Scorpio. Well, now in Aries, especially, she's really got to work for it. And so, especially when it comes to our relationships, there may be some kind of rude awakenings that we see there. That over that weekend, there will be all this, there's that kind of sense of glamour and fatefulness and romance and, all of that. But then there's, okay, now we have to figure out what we're doing with that. And Aries it's the youngest sign of the zodiac. So there is that, and the first sign of the zodiac. And so it is, Venus in Aries can be associated with new beginnings in our relationships. And then coming off, but still in orb of the conjunction with that Neptune and North Node, there's also that sense of fatefulness that we see with the North Node, and the hunger of the dragon's head, the desire, this kind of almost a haunted feeling, okay, that, we're meant for something more, and we're headed in a particular direction. And that direction is the consequence of our choices. Okay, there is a karmic quality to the nodes. And so here is Venus now beginning a new cycle, setting off on the Aries adventure, albeit potentially with some misgivings, but coming off of this potent, almost high, I would say. And we may, that said, we may see a certain amount of potential overindulgence with Venus conjoining Neptune, but also a sense of the potential for great inspiration. This could be a really amazing time for artists and visionaries. Okay. And, even if one is not engaged in great creative pursuits oneself or great romantic pursuits, which also may be heightened by this, even if one's not engaged in those things, this is still a time when we can tap into a vision for our future, right? And a vision that connects us with other people, a vision that connects us with all life on Earth. And now put this in the context of the Jupiter station. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. Neptune is considered the modern or transcendental ruler of Pisces. Okay. And so this Jupiter stationing direct at this point is carrying forward some of that vision that got stirred up with this great big conjunction. And now Jupiter stationing direct right after Venus has entered Aries is almost like saying, I know you're heading off into the great unknown there, Venus. I know you're you're embarking on what could be a kind of scary adventure, but I'm here to tell you to keep the faith. Okay. I'm here to help you carry that vision forward. So yeah, I really love this.
And if you're not into art, maybe appreciate some art or watch a really good movie or listen to some really nice music. That would be ways to use that. And
Or
then we
read
have
or tell stories. Yeah.
mhm. And then we have the sun that's sextile Chiron. And, um, you know, to me, it's an opportunity to teach and heal.
And I think that's a very interesting kind of juxtaposition that's going on here, is that this time of heightened inspiration and vision has the capacity to be instructive and healing.
Well, and
That's
I
very
would say dream big or have big intentions. Um, be realistic a little bit, but it doesn't have to be totally realistic. But don't worry about the how, just worry about the dream right now.
Yeah, Jupiter is still technically square Saturn. I mean, it's a separating square, and there's, I think a 5 degree, 6 degree orb at this point. But, there is still that, Saturn is still co-present with that stuff going on in Pisces, and is still answering to Jupiter. And so, yeah, Saturn is concerned with structure, right? But right now, the structure is not the big important thing that's being emphasized with these transits. What's being emphasized is the need to renew our hope, renew our faith, renew our vision for the possibility that things can work out all right, the possibility that we can do good things, and that we can do good things that benefit everyone. This is a very, a lot of emphasis on the universal here. The both the planet at large and then the larger universe, and humanity as a whole, and all of the creatures that we interact with, whether we know it or not. So that it's such a very connective emphasis here, which again I think is really interesting in the context of where the Jupiter station retrograde happened,
Mhm.
and that the relationship emphasis we saw there.
Exactly. We've grown a lot and we can continue to grow. Okay, here's some other aspects. We have Mars square Chiron. The moon is square Pluto. Sun Mercury is square Vesta. The south node and black moon are opposite Neptune and north node. And Jupiter is quincunx Vesta, which we already talked about earlier.
Right.
So jump in anywhere you'd like. And these aren't connecting really at all, but they're just kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that all over the place.
A sprinkling of squares. So when we see this many squares at work, there is a certain amount of friction and toughness that we have to deal with. Um, Squares have the nature of Mars, and so there is a sense of conflict that can be associated with them. Um, and maybe we get a little impatient when we're dealing with squares, especially in the case of the Mars Chiron square, with Mars squaring. Chiron is in Aries, the sign that Mars rules. So okay, so that's a double whammy of Mars stuff then. And again, Mars in the sign of his fall and retrograde. So there can be, that combination with that square can stir up our impatience, especially when we're feeling like we are not making progress on things that we want to, and that somehow reflects poorly on us. We have to deal with our internalized judgments there. And and a sense of maybe I'm not as capable and competent as I want to be, and how dependent or independent can I actually be at this time? Okay. Um, Now, in combination with the moon squaring off against Pluto, the moon is exalted in Taurus. So that is a relatively stable moon, in a better position to deal with the square to Pluto than would be the case in other signs. But it is still potentially emotionally challenging. Um, and in particular can stir up a sense that things are very complicated, especially when it comes to how do we maintain or achieve our material needs, our creature comforts, especially in the face of social systems that are not terribly sympathetic. um, so yeah, so that can be a struggle that we've got going on there. And then we've got this the Mercury and Sun square to Vesta that is going on, that may have some of us feeling maybe a little distracted by the social goings on, the news cycle, what have you, and that is producing some challenging feelings. Okay. Um, so all of those squares, yes, they add some kind of background noise and friction um, to what we're experiencing. I don't think it truly detracts from the good things that I've already talked about, the enjoyable qualities that I've already talked about relating to this period of time. What I do think that they do is encourage us not to get complacent, not to waste the opportunities of this quality of time, or be overly indulgent, but instead to recognize and work with some of the complexity, and actually in a way that actually gets us further than if we just kind of relaxed into the bliss.
There's still a little bit of work to do, but just keep going, moving forward, one foot in front of the other. Oops. So, other considerations, which it was mentioned about Venus had ingressed into Aries less than 2 hours prior to the Jupiter stationing direct, and then 5 days prior, Uranus stationed direct on January 30th. So, when two planets are stationing direct or retrograde, to me that's always a strong vibration or reverberation happening, and around those dates, give or take, I use a week or two on either side. Sometimes we can feel a little bit more the tenseness. Um, there could be like static in the air. What would you like to say about that?
So Uranus has an electrical quality, depending upon how prominent it is for us natally or what else is going on, what transits are happening that are going to stir up that particular flavor. I believe the moon will be conjoining Uranus a day after the Jupiter station. And anytime you have Moon Uranus conjunctions, it can be kind of a live wire feeling. I associate it with insomnia personally. But when we've got this kind of combination with both Uranus and Jupiter stationing direct within a week of each other, that can be a lot of, a sense of something big, a sense of a major shift going on. even if we don't understand what that shift is going to be, we can still kind of feel it underneath the surface of things. And then, like I said, there's that kind of electrical quality to Uranus that I think having that be underlying the Jupiter station. Remember that Jupiter makes whatever Jupiter touches bigger. And so even though they're not touching in terms of having an aspect going on between them, nevertheless, I feel like this layering of their station energy is combining their energies, right? And so I feel like that can make for some things feeling a bit larger than life, but also the potential for their themes to combine in ways that might be a little physically uncomfortable because of that electrical quality. Yeah. Also, I do feel like because Jupiter is stationing in Gemini, which has an affinity for technology, and so does Uranus. We may see more big news pertaining to tech going on right now. We've already had quite a bit of, intense information pertaining to tech that's been going on during Jupiter's sojourn in Gemini. And then the month of January has had some intense technological news as well. So I feel like there's just these two stations happening so close to each other is going to continue that emphasis. For those of us who are prone to anxiety, extra self-care is important at this time, and to remind ourselves that we don't have to let our thoughts run amok. I'm guilty of this. Like right before bed, I'm a major insomniac, and you get this combination of the Jupiter Uranus, and I'm like, oh yeah, that affects the sleep for me. So just be extra kind to yourself regarding self-care, especially if you start to have racing thoughts or anxiety during this time.
And most people would have some coping techniques, whether it's meditation or to breathe or go for a walk, to implement those at this time. So, because I think that what you said about, doing good self-care and taking care of yourself and having compassion for yourself and just be kind to yourself is very good advice. Do you have any other advice, or that was what you wanted to say?
That's the big one. Since Uranus is in Taurus, maybe be cautious about your eating habits during this time, since especially, we'll have had the Venus conjunction with Neptune that can expand our indulgence, and then having Jupiter stationing so soon after again heightens the potential for overindulgence. So yeah, don't do anything that actually upsets your stomach, right? Or that negatively impacts how your thoughts are going, like overindulgence in sugar for those people whose minds race when they have too much sugar, that kind of thing, or caffeine.
And another thing, I'd have a recording app on your phone, so when you get a brilliant idea, you can record it into your phone, or have a little tablet that you carry with you and just jot down notes. They might be very, very useful in the future.
Yes, this is a time when inspiration may strike repeatedly, and especially with that kind of frenetic quality that we have seen with Jupiter in Gemini, and that gets combined with the Uranus energy that is also kind of frenetic. you may need to be documenting quite a lot of ideas during this time.
Yes, and probably things will start to pick up, and especially when Mars goes direct at the end of February, about February 23rd or 24th. So I want to thank all of you that are watching live and all of you that come back and watch at a later time. There'll be more episodes of the Astrology Star Sisters in the future. And here's Madam Simon's little information, and I'll let her tell you about that.
Right. So I write about astrology on Patreon and create custom astrological art for my patrons there. And like Liz, I am a consulting astrologer. So if you're interested in a consultation, you can find me at iconalchemy.com.
And I do consultations, and you can email me to make an appointment. I have a newsletter and, of course, this YouTube channel. So I always appreciate you subscribing and liking. Other shows that I'm doing with Astrology Star Sisters are the Dwarf Planets, Planet Stationing, Decans using astrology and tarot, fixed stars, Uranian astrology, and Chinese astrology. I'm doing a series on the 2025 astrological highlights, and we're going to have a show called Astrological Magic with Robert Passetti. And then Justin and I do the monthly astrology forecast, the full moon forecast, and a Chiron asteroid series. So we have lots to offer you. I will be on Talk Cosmos on February 27th, and you can watch it here on my channel at 1 p.m. talking about the Pisces new moon, and I'm part of the archetypal symbols team. And again, to get a hold of Simon, her website's iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And thanks for being here today, and we'll see you again soon.